She was just a child, too small for the courtroom's heavy silence, yet her presence carried a weight no one expected. Surrounded by adults who spoke in rules, laws, and punishments, she stood there with a truth so raw it shattered the room. Her words weren't defiance, nor anger. They were a cry of need, of survival. In a place built to judge, not to listen, her voice broke through the walls of authority. And when she spoke, the judge's face changed, and every heart in that room froze. What could a little girl possibly say that left even the strictest judge in shock? It was supposed to be just another day in the life of a little girl who had already known more struggle than most adults. Her name was Maya, only 8 years old, with braids her mother carefully tied each morning before school. Like many children her age, she carried a backpack heavier than her small frame, filled with pencils, books, and quiet dreams of a future brighter than her present. But unlike many, Maya's days were marked by absent meals, absent comfort, and too often, absent fairness. Her mother worked double shifts at a diner, doing her best to stretch every dollar. The mornings started early, the nights ended late, and in between, there were moments where Maya had to be braver than a child should ever be. At school, she hid her hunger behind forced smiles, hoping no one would notice the rumble of her stomach. Teachers often assumed she was distracted, but the truth was simpler and far more painful. That morning had been no different. Maya walked into the courthouse, clutching her mother's hand, her eyes darting around the tall walls and solemn faces. She didn't belong in this place, and she knew it. But circumstances had brought them here, circumstances that were never kind to families like hers. In that cold room, filled with rules and authority, Maya was expected to stay quiet, invisible, just another child sitting in the shadows of adults. No one expected her to say a word. No one imagined that she would. And yet, it would be her small, fragile voice, not the judge's gavel, that would echo loudest that day. The courtroom was not built for children, and certainly not for children like Maya. Its marble floors, polished wooden benches, and towering judge's bench seemed designed to remind anyone who entered of their smallness. For Maya, that feeling was all too familiar. She sat quietly beside her mother, legs dangling off the seat, her stomach aching from the absence of breakfast. Hunger wasn't new. It had been her silent companion for as long as she could remember, but today it pressed harder, sharper, refusing to be ignored. As the proceedings began, voices filled the room. Lawyers spoke in terms she didn't understand, words heavy with judgment, authority, and distance. Papers shuffled, pens scratched, and the gavel struck like thunder. To Maya, it was all noise, a storm raging around her while she tried to stay still and invisible. Yet beneath the surface of this ordinary courtroom routine lay an unspoken truth. Families like hers were judged long before they ever stepped inside. Her mother was being questioned about bills unpaid, about missed obligations, about circumstances stacked against her from the start. Each word carried the sting of accusation, though Maya's mother had done nothing but work herself to exhaustion to survive. Still, the room viewed her not as a woman doing her best, but as a statistic, a problem, a burden. The weight of systemic bias was invisible, but crushing, and Maya could feel it pressing down on them both. The hunger clawed at her again, deeper this time. She pressed her small hand to her stomach, hoping it would quiet. But it didn't. Her vision blurred at the edges, her body weaker by the second. She wanted to tell her mother, but she stayed silent, afraid to cause trouble. Trouble was what the world expected from them, and she had learned too young to avoid giving anyone an excuse to look at her differently. Then the judge's tone shifted. His voice, stern and sharp, cut through the air, directed at Maya's mother. Words like responsibility and failure echoed through the chamber, louder than they should have. Maya watched her mother shrink under the weight of each one, though she stood tall and proud. Tears threatened, but she held them back. Maya could sense the unfairness, even if she couldn't name it. The way the questions weren't just about her mother's choices, but about who they were, where they came from, and the color of their skin. The silence between each exchange grew heavier, suffocating. Maya's chest tightened. The hunger became unbearable, a roaring emptiness that drowned out everything else. She tried to shift her focus, to stay quiet as expected, but the ache refused to let her. Her small body trembled as she looked up at the towering figure of the judge. And then, without warning, the words escaped. Soft, almost a whisper, yet piercing enough to stop the storm around her. "I'm hungry." The room froze. Papers stopped moving, whispers cut off. Even the judge's gavel seemed suspended mid-air. It wasn't just what she said, it was when she said it, how she said it. In a room obsessed with rules, her voice was a reminder of something far more powerful: humanity. But silence doesn't always mean safety. For a moment, no one knew what would come next. Would her words spark compassion, or would they be dismissed, like so much else in her short life? For a heartbeat, the courtroom was suspended in silence. The words of an 8-year-old had cut deeper than any lawyer's argument or judge's decree. "I'm hungry." Simple, honest, impossible to ignore. Yet in that silence, the weight of centuries seemed to hang in the air, centuries of voices, just like hers. Too often silenced, too often overlooked. The judge shifted in his seat. His eyes, sharp and cold a moment before, now flickered with something else. Was it discomfort, shame, or simply the unease of being confronted with truth? Around the room, whispers rippled. Some leaned forward, others looked away, unwilling to meet the child's gaze. The courtroom was built to handle facts, evidence, and law, but it was never built to handle raw humanity in its purest form. Maya's mother froze, torn between pride in her daughter's courage and fear of what might come next. She knew how easily moments like this could be twisted, how a plea for basic need could be painted as disruption, defiance, or disrespect. For families like theirs, even innocence was dangerous. The gavel struck, loud and jarring, but it only emphasized the stillness that followed. The judge cleared his throat, fumbling for authority that suddenly seemed fragile. And for the first time, the mask of order slipped, revealing what lay beneath: the uncomfortable truth that justice in this room was not blind, it was selective. The hunger in Maya's voice wasn't just about food. It was about the hunger for fairness, for dignity, for a life where our existence wasn't questioned at every turn. And in that instant, every person in the room was forced to see it. The moment hung like a storm cloud, charged with tension. Would the judge respond with compassion, or retreat into the safety of law and procedure? Would Maya's voice spark change, or be remembered only as a child's outburst in a place where children were meant to stay silent? The room braced for his response. And when it came, it would not just decide the fate of one little girl. It would reveal the truth about the system itself. The judge finally spoke, his voice quieter than before. He asked that the proceedings pause, and for a moment, the courtroom shifted from law to life. Food was brought in, not as charity, but as necessity. Yet the act, however small, carried a weight of contradiction. Why did it take a child's breaking point to remind a room full of adults that dignity begins with the basics? Why did compassion only surface when silence was shattered? For Maya, the hunger eased that day, but the lesson lingered far beyond the courtroom walls. She would remember how her truth, though simple, forced even the most powerful to stop and listen. And her mother would remember, too, that survival in a system built against them often demanded more than strength. It demanded moments of unbearable vulnerability. This story was not about one girl, one judge, or one courtroom. It was a reflection of something larger, something deeper, the way poverty and race intertwine, how justice bends under the weight of bias, and how the smallest voices are often the most powerful if only we choose to hear them. Maya's words were a reminder that racism isn't always shouted. It is often hidden in the quiet spaces, in the assumptions, in the indifference that leaves families struggling for the most basic needs. And so the question remains, how many more children must whisper their hunger, their pain, their truth, before the world listens without being forced into silence first? Her voice echoed once in that courtroom. The real challenge is whether it will echo in us.